Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happens throughout the week. 50 years of hip hop. I've done a couple of things to cover that. I think you should check it out. But before we go there, big shout out to the supporters over at patreon.com. If you would like to know what that means to be a supporter, a producer, a patron of Hip Hop Now Podcast, visit the link in the description of this episode. Just click it and then you can go ahead and browse, right? But shout out to them. But 50 years of hip hop, you know, I've chosen several ways of bringing extra special content beyond the normal news feed you get every week, right? And perspectives, including, but not limited to, a recap of each episode by episode, or recap, review, whatever you want to call it, of the final season of Wu-Tang and American Saga. I had a couple of guests on here. We chopped it up about each episode, and then we had a finale for the final episode where we did a live stream and people tapped in and shared their thoughts and best episode and blah, 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 and all that good stuff. It was real good fun. Early on in the year, we did a That Time in Hip Hop podcast I used to do with the homie Tone, intothedome.com. Check him out. But we kind of did a timetable, like, yo, from beginning to end, right? 50 years of hip hop. We highlighted a number of, times in hip hop and gave our perspectives, gave our own stories about when we first, heard hip hop and all that good stuff. Featured guest was Yintz from a podcast I used to do with him called Hip Hop Twitter. Shout out to him. And it was really dope. So definitely also check that out on the YouTube channel right here, or you can find it on the audio feed. It's there as well. That was closer to the beginning of the year. And not too long ago, I produced a hip hop town hall with guests like Rod Digger and Tracy Lee, and did some of those same things, kind of talked about hip hop and its impact, not only as on the culture of music itself, but also just popular culture in the world at large. And it was hosted by Lisa Durden. So you can check that out also. People ask questions, chat room was on fire. So we've done a couple of things here in Hip Hop Now podcast to commemorate 50 years of hip hop. Now, every day, technically, I'm doing that. But we have to continue to celebrate, right? Because even though it has been a discussion about older cats selling out venues, older hip hop artists selling out venues that younger artists can't, I had some thoughts about that. And maybe somewhere down the line I'll mention it, but I'll just say it real quick. I think there's been a rise because of 50 years of hip hop, but some of these old school cats weren't eating like this. They just weren't. And I'm a little afraid of what happens when the 50th anniversary is over. Like, we'll pay y'all again at 75. Like Magic Johnson said, we ain't gonna be here, okay? So I don't know, but that's my thoughts on that. So big shout out to hiphopdx.com, djbooth.net, Double XL kind of helped out a little bit too. And all the places where I'm getting some of these stories from. Let's get right into the business though. Benny the Butcher. Again, this is coming from hiphopdx.com. He was on the Rap Radar podcast. But Benny the Butcher demands more respect for rapper title And in quotes, they have people try to hate. Let's get a quote, though. Here's more of him saying what he thinks. It's not a lot of respect on being a rapper right now. A lot of these podcast influencers, a lot of these characters, they criticize rap. They got whole platforms to criticize rap in a bad way. Rap is this, rap is that, ishing on a rapper. I hate that because we are almost the bar for how people live their lives. You'll hear somebody say, I'm richer than rappers. Let me stop y'all there. Okay. Benny, let me stop you right there. Is he lying? Not about the first part, but it ain't just rap. So let's stop that. It's not just rap because it is true. There's some YouTubers, people, they take whatever platform they're on, YouTube, Twitch, whether they do an audio podcast, they take it right to social media and say some of the same things. They make a living off of criticizing, in a lot of ways, entertainment. But it also goes to politics and everything else. Like literally, not even taking a position of I do not like. Some will claim that, but if you look at all their content, uh, it's predominantly them criticizing something. It's like, well, what do you like? You know what I'm saying? So I don't disagree with him there, but it's not just rap. So, like I said in other podcasts, stop crying because it's everybody. Uh, and I don't agree with it. But I think when you say that to them, you're saying their opinions matter by even doing this, by even blatantly saying this. It's saying that you need them. You wish they were praising you. You know what I'm saying? You wish it was more praising you. And are you worthy of praise? Well, that depends on a person's personal opinion. But in today's age, yeah, there are plenty of people who criticize. Um, But the influence of rappers, like Richard and the Rapper, well, Benny the Butcher, that could also be an insult, right? Because the people, I'm assuming the people you're talking about that would say stuff like that aren't rappers, obviously, are people who are far beyond anything rap. And at the end of the day, who wants to be richer than a rapper? Poor people. So my thing is, if we're talking about, if you're trying to low key talk about white people or wealthy people, they want to be wealthy. They don't want to be rich. They want a bunch of chains and counting money on camera and all that. Rappers, you got to understand, you look silly when you step out of your square. You just do. Some rappers can step out of their square and they know politics, they know sports or whatever. They may know the word around. They have something to say beyond let me get my money, because essentially that's all you're saying. And in a lot of ways, what you have to understand is you're not like a activist being criticized. You're not. You're a rapper who raps about a lifestyle that honestly either leads to the grave or prison. It's just keeping it a buck, right? So saying why can't you get the same kind of respect, because this is kind of where this is going, maybe as another profession, it's like, well, I mean, there's a lot of negative to what you do, and it's not about hip-hop. Hip-hop isn't negative. Your messaging is negative. Now, this is the thing. We're gonna get a little bit deep, right? In the 90s, some of y'all know this, some of y'all heads know this. There was a point in time where us as hip hop fans had to explain why we like the music we like, considering what they talked about, including saying the N word. Back then, we had to be the explainers to our families and, people who knew us who were from a different generation. And a lot of times, I remember the first time I was even asked about it, like using the N word and talking about this and that, and why would you like that? And I said straight up, This ain't no different than a movie. We done watched Scarface a million times. It's the same thing. They just rapping about it. Rags to riches, especially when you coming from poverty. And a lot of these rappers are coming from that. So they're going to talk about what they know. They're not going to switch. And honestly, even when they get out of that situation, it doesn't go away. There are people who think like, yo, you ain't really on the block like that. So why you rapping about that? Well, that don't mean he out there doing it. But at the end of the day, if you're going to consider yourself an artist and you want to be taken seriously as an artist, I think there's a grace period for rappers from the street who tend to talk the street stuff, right? Let them come out and drop whatever they want. Let them talk about the streets. Let them talk about being in jail, who they shot at, the ops, all of them. Do all of that. Let them get it out their system, because that's what every rapper needs. It doesn't matter what your start is. You have to get out and tell your story. And sometimes that could take 3 or 4 albums. But at some point, when you kind of reach that plateau, you have to adjust what you talk about. Now, you can still make reference to that because it hasn't changed. But if it is one for one, no different from when you were making tracks and starving to now where you in places I will never be because you got money, something has to change, because not only is your audience growing and you should be growing with them, but you should be offering a different perspective from the last 17 albums of shooting up the spot. Okay. At some point, people are gonna get tired of it. Even if you got bars with it. Like, people just, oh man, I'm just stick to the joints that had the impression on me. It's really tough to make an impression when you've been dope or nice on a mic like that, talking about the same things for so long. There's fatigue involved. And it's not really turning their back on you. It's just like, what else you got? That's all you got going on? You still rags to riches? No, I got money. But okay, well, you kind of had money for a while too. Now, what else you got going on? Do you care? And you're like, what do you like? Like, you know what I'm saying? So again, Benny the Butcher is like one of my favorite rappers. Like, he's Kendrick's 1A, he's 1B, right? Put it that way. Even though Conway kind of making his way back into my, but what I don't like is when you have an album coming out and you're giving the media this, because you may be able to promote the album, but this is the thing that's going to move the needle. Why? Because it moves the needles for your critics. Negativity moves the needle on social media. So social media, YouTube, whatever it may be. So if you feel some kind of way, you're giving them more content. They're not going to take your advice. They don't care if you don't like them. Monetize them channels. Them channels go crazy. They don't care. They want a personal beef. They want you to say their name so they could get rich. So to me, I feel like, yo, be quiet, fam. Just say it's unfortunate, that some can't see what I'm trying to do, but I can't stop. I got to keep moving and try to make great music, and hopefully people like it. Just humble yourself, fam. Don't be making no demands of people who don't have to listen to you. They don't. I don't care if there's a nerd behind the keyboard going in. He don't have to do anything you say just because you said it, right? So forget them. Like I said in other podcasts, focus on your craft, but please understand there will be no sympathy for you being a rapper. And I don't care what influence hip hop has on people outside of it. They don't have to take the same risk as you. They don't have the same situation. Same people saying that they ain't gotta walk around with 100 dudes. They walk right into Walmart by themselves with the same money as you. So think about that. I don't know if that helps or not, but I figured I'd just say it. Alchemist thinks that Prodigy is the real GOAT. Now, Let's see where if I can find the quote. I'm going clean sweep, man. Prodigy across the map. That's my greatest rapper of all time. Broke rules, Nas, of course. It was always Nas or P, but I used to always tell Big Twin we would talk about it. P used to break rules. So let's talk about the GOAT conversation, right? So, first of all, you know who I say the GOAT is. Did a whole episode on it. Do not ask me to read. No, that is it. That is the reason why I find it. Hip Hop Now podcast is a GOAT episode, and I'm referring to LL Cool J and pants leg up, whatever blotitious or what, whatever you want to throw at it to try to knock it down and say he's not the GOAT because of these things. When your GOAT was wearing an all brown outfit, but whatever. Uh, I make the case breaking down why, right? GOAT means greatest of all time. Now, Muhammad Ali kind of made greatest of all time famous because he would say, I'm the greatest in the world. I'm the greatest of all time, blah, 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 whatever. But then LL made the term GOAT, the acronym. That was always the greatest of all times, but nobody used GOAT. He made that a thing. Dropped the whole album called GOAT, right? And at the time, I was kind of like, you're not the GOAT. Like, you know what I'm saying? But now we live in an age where you hear people say, like, he's one of my GOATs. What greatest of all, like the greatest, like number one. One. Not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One. I blame No Child Left Behind. You know why? Okay, I'm going a little too far. But the whole notion of everybody gets a trophy, the participation award. I blame that because it's like if you lose, you're not the worst thing. You're not the scum of the earth if you lose, no matter what it is. You competed, right? But you weren't the winner. And sometimes there's only going to be one winner. And people pretended, well, we want to try to. No. Watch the Super Bowl. Watch the World Series. Watch the World Cup. Watch all of it. Boxing championship. Watch all of it. Only one person, one team, or whatever is recognized in a competitive sport, and hip hop is one of those. So there's no GOATs. There's just one person. Now, I'm not saying that Alchemist can't say that Prodigy is the GOAT because he can say what he wants. But I will say this. If I had to really think about it, like if someone asked me, do you think Prodigy is the GOAT? I couldn't just say, oh, no, I think LL's the GOAT. I could just tell you why I don't think Prodigy is the GOAT. I think Prodigy had a point in time in his career where he was one of the best. But never did, and I'm just going to speak for NY, never did I come across a conversation where he stuck around in the King of New York conversation. I think there was a time where he was kind of like, well, what about P? But there was a point in time where it was pretty clear where it was like Nas, Big. Jay-Z inserted himself, and much later, he wasn't even around long enough at that point to even consider it being those three. But obviously later he kind of proved he belonged in the conversation. But at the point in time in which it was a King of New York conversation, Prodigy was like, well, what about P? But it's not to the level of Big or Nas, right? Saying P broke rules. Honestly, I have no idea what he means by that. But what I will say is there's a podcast And I only say this because this is the only place I heard the audio from. Doesn't mean it's exclusive, but there's a podcast made by WNYC. That's what you could type in your podcast joint, called Infamous or something like that. And it's really centered around Prodigy's health, but it doesn't, when you listen, it's not it's not exclusively about uh, sickle cell and him growing up with that. A lot of it is about telling his story. So sickle cell is a big part of that story, but they also talk a lot about him from a rap standpoint, and they have excerpts of him talking about how he felt at those times in his rap career. And I remember Prodigy saying that when they dropped their original first album, Juvenile Hell, not the infamous Juvenile Hell, he said to himself when he heard Nas that that's what he needed to do. Because on Juvenile Hell, him and Havoc's approach was more or less the rap of that time, that early 90s time, with the energy. And Infamous was more of the new wave, the way you approach the beat, the energy, your cadence, everything. Nas influenced that. You can't be the greatest because Muhammad Ali saying that Sugar Ray Robinson influenced him. Sugar Ray Robinson was like on his way out, and Muhammad Ali was on his way in. Nas was getting started. He only had Illmatic, so they were peers. So if you're not better than your peers, or your peer comes into the game already having a formula for what you need to do next to become the dude who Alchemist considers himself the GOAT, how can you be the GOAT if he gave you the blueprint? Right? Because you wasn't rapping like this. That's why that line by uh, Nas on Ether about Jay-Z, I rule you ever since you used to rap like the Foosh niggas, Nas design your blueprint, who you kidding? There's a lot of truth to that. And in a lot of ways, and I'm not making a case for Nas over everybody, but just as an example, Nas never really changed the way he rapped, really. Maybe now, he's older, but when he got into the game, he rapped the way he rapped. Biggie rapped differently, right? Biggie was like hype with his rap. Prodigy and them had a different flow too, and so did Jay-Z. So it's tough to kind of call somebody the GOAT based off of what came after, because of course, Prodigy has classic verses, features, songs, but also your solo album didn't live up to expectations, and that doesn't make it whack. But again, you got to compare yourself to your peers. And I think even in amongst his peers, he's not better than them, and he's just not. Um, but you cannot talk about that era without talking about Mobb Deep. That without Mobb Deep in that era, it's just Nas. Like Queensbridge was like, oh, Nas is it. But then Mobb Deep came and helped, like the Thun, like the influence is there. But it's like Allen Iverson. Yeah, your influence is there on other rappers. But when it comes to your peers, they just have more championships than you. It is what it is, man. And lastly, this week, if you're from the future, you know what to do, man. Come on. Get on out that exit. Get your ass out of here. You already listened to the stuff. You already know what happened. But this week, two projects were released, right? On Halloween, Lloyd Banks released the fourth album in the series, I believe. Halloween Havoc 4, the 72 hour something, the 72 hour, whatever. I have no idea what that means. I really don't care. I think that means he recorded all of that in 72 hours, and that's why he said that, which is cool, but okay. Um, if I had one knock on it, I thought the other covers, the other three, were dope, and this one is kind of like, oh, okay, it's gonna get the orange branding, but that's not what matters. I personally think this release from Lloyd Banks is better than his album. Yep, I think one, people sleep on this series. If you haven't heard his Halloween Havoc series, which is Halloween Havoc is kind of a play on the WCW pay per view or whatever, which is now the WWE pay per view, whatever. From back in the days, it was WCW, and they were dope. And this was before he actually started to drop albums again, but nobody was checking for it. I think this project was put him kind of in people's crosshairs because of the simple fact that he started releasing albums like, oh yeah, Lloyd Banks, he was nice and blah blah blah. So now he checked for stuff. But back when I heard like Halloween Havoc 2, I was like, yo, people need to listen to this. So Halloween Havoc 4 is 15 tracks, 47 minutes. And I think what I like most about it that I could say was better than the album, it's just beats and bars. And I like the beats a little bit more. I think Lloyd Banks can sometimes be an acquired taste because he is extremely monotone and his flow does not change. And that's not a bad thing, but it does not change. And I think for some people's attention span, if they can't lock in on the lyrics, it can all start to sound the same, right? It's difficult for you to extract the emotion from these tracks because he's straight down the middle with it. Like his voice is not really changing. You don't know if he's happy about it, he's sad about it. You don't know. But when I put it on, I was like, I like this joint. Like this one, like what I described about him being monotone in that way, that's what the albums did for me for the most part. I would like wind up skipping to the joints that I don't know impacted, like when they hit, they grabbed my attention. I think on this mixtape, I hesitate to say mixtape because I just don't know what that means anymore. But I just found that this grabbed my attention a little bit more than the album. And I've been listening to it for the past couple of days because I think it's dope. And honestly, that's my impressions, but sorry it's not elaborate, but I think you should check it out. So if you're a Lloyd Banks fan, you already know. If you ain't hear it, go listen to it. I think you'll enjoy it. If you're not, and all those reasons I named as far as his performance, it trust me, it's exactly what you thought it was. It's the same voice and flow. So that's that. And the other project that was just released, The Alchemist Flying High Part 2. Now, these are like EPs where Alchemist does like 4 songs or whatever. And then there's 4 instrumentals from those 4 songs. So this is 10 songs. So there's 5 songs and 10 instrumentals. And it clocks in around 27 minutes. Action Bronson's on here, Gang Green, Conway, Currency's on here. And Flying High Part 1 was cool, but I kind of didn't like it. It was kind of boring. You know what I mean? Flying High 2, though, I think is much better. And I don't know if that's because it has the rappers I like on it. So therefore the beats are a little bit different. Because when he started reaching, I think the first Flying High had Larry June and Boldy James, and I'm not a fan of their flows more than anything. So it made it a little boring to me. But I'm a big Currency fan. I'm a big Conway fan. I like Action Bronson and I like Gang Green. So it's kind of like I just felt like it was a better project to me. Now, if this was all one big album, right, called Flying High, maybe be half and half or whatever. But I'm kind of glad it's not because Part one was kind of like, oh yeah, this is all right, and then I moved on. This one, I'm like, oh nah, I could rock with this. I have something I could listen to for a while. So I think both those albums are worthy of any hip hop head checking them out for numerous reasons. You got beats, you got bars, you got variety, you got legendary producers like Alchemist, you got you know uh, rappers caliber of Lloyd Banks and Conway. Like you get kind of everything. So there you have it. That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Spill, Threads, whatever, all at Vegas World INC, and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Like, comment. What did you think about those projects? If you heard them, is Prodigy your GOAT? Are there goats or one GOAT? I don't know. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Also know if I don't really have no time to watch videos. If that's you, well, it's available in audio form. It's always been available in audio form on whatever podcasting platform you listen to. So if you like using Apple's, use that. If you like Spotify, it's there also. So all you got to do is search for Hip Hop Now Podcast, subscribe, review if you like, and stay locked into weekly hip hop content. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.